What is suspicious to own but not illegal? I lost the key to my crawlspace's padlock once, and went to the hardware store to buy bolt cutters, so I could replace it. I told the cashier why I was buying them without being asked, and he was like, "It's funny, everyone that buys bolt cutters feels like they need to tell me why they are buying them. I think they just want me to know they aren't about to do something illegal." Back in the day, car thieves used dent pullers to pop ignitions. If you were found with one outside of a body shop, people assumed you were a car thief. I was at Home Depot with a shopping cart full of PVC stuff, and this cop standing in line behind me says, "Building a potato cannon, huh?" I actually was building a potato cannon. I knew a guy who mounted a potato cannon to the roof of his car. A cop pulled him over for speeding and asked what it was. He supposedly managed to convince the cop it was a wind tunnel for a school science project. He removed it once he got home. I had a similar thing happen. Went to Bunnings as a teenager and asked for a barbecue igniter. The guy working there goes, "I assume you're going to need some PVC pipe as well." He then proceeded to rip off the igniter off one of the demo BBQs and said, "Stick that in your pocket," and then took me to the aisle and proceeded to equip me with all the PVC pipe parts. I worked at a hardware store in college, and loved helping people make beer bongs, potato cannons, etc. I also worked at a hardware store in high school and college, and the stoner kid I sat next to in high school algebra once came in and was just straight up like, "I need lamps and fertilizer because I'm gonna grow some wheat." Hooked him up, because Ace is the helpful place. We stayed friends on Facebook, and he's a Holocaust denying, incel neo-Nazi now, so it's not all happy endings. Multiple padlocks on your basement door. My friends and I moved to a new city and were trying to find a place to live. One of the houses we looked at had a door in the basement that was padlocked with multiple locks, but was also nailed shut, and I don't mean a couple nails. I mean like nails around every inch of the door frame. Needless to say, we did not rent that house lol. We looked at a house that had a full basement. One of the corners had a wall angling it off with a door in it. This made a triangle. The wall of this little room had a 6-inch ring bolted halfway up in the wall. I've seen this before, not once but twice. Check my post history. First time was this old house that an old woman lived in. It was always rumored that she kept her mentally ill daughter chained up in the attic. Well, once she died, I got roped into helping clean out all the clutter. Once we made it to the back bedrooms, we got to the attic stairs. Then we started on the attic. After a few days of hauling out old crap, we discovered a small wooden mattress bolted to the floor next to the chimney. The chimney had a steel ring bolted into it above the mattress. Round 2. My brother rented a place in Seattle that had a closet in the basement with deadbolts on the outside of the door. There was a metal eye hook above the closet and fingernail scratches on the inside of the door. Round 3. Did a job at an old hippie couple's house. Had to go down in the basement. The old guy watched me like a hawk. The basement had about 500 guns in it. There was a room under the stairs with 5 deadbolts and a reinforced door. He said, "You can't go in there." I was helping with an inspection contract for the city which involved going into basements. Most looked pretty much the same. Went to a nice place near downtown. In the back corner of the basement was a floor-to-ceiling chain link fence room, about 10 feet by 15 feet. Huh, dog kennel, I thought, then I saw in it was a bed and a chair. I turned down the coffee the homeowner offered me. Man, let me answer this for you. I rent a few properties out. One has a door suspiciously like the one described, although I don't think it looks creepy. Behind it is a small basement room, maybe 10 x 5 feet, with a safe buried mostly in the ground. The safe is open and empty, but I've given up on moving it. This room is dark, a bit wet, and seemingly impossible to completely vent off. You don't want it open. The door frame is inexplicably solid oak or something, and one side is structural. The frame is not a perfect rectangle, so this leaves me here. I have this door that takes 20 minutes to wedge in over the uneven ground into the asymmetric frame. Out of 6 renter groups over the years, 4 have opened it after I've explained all this. You can even look in the room from the outside if you stick your phone through. So I keep nailing and screwing and locking this door into what is essentially an exterior wall, and every college student I rent to can't handle the curiosity of a room they already know what's inside of. I even show them a picture of the inside. But saying, hey, you don't need to go in this room which is extensively locked, I'll show you a picture of what's inside, just seems to be even more suspicious to them. They just keep opening that damn door and end up having to call me because they couldn't close it and now the house is cold. They pretty much always get their entire deposit back except for one group who damaged the door and I had to get it fixed. So yeah, I think that's probably what's going on here. There was a case like this here in Cleveland. Turns out, it wasn't illegal for him to keep multiple padlocks on the doors. What was illegal, however, are the 3 girls he kidnapped as teenagers and have kept in his house, in chains, for free use rape over the course of 10 years. Even going so far as to getting one of these girls pregnant. Well, as it turns out, she kept a diary, complete with a bunch of symbols in every day's entry. Those symbols were code for what he had done to them, and to whom. She tracked every single rape, every single beating, every single time he burned them, everything. It came up useful as one of the women broke out of the house. She got her notebook back, and authorities used the diary symbols of each entry as a separate charge of rape, a separate case of assault, ECT. He ended up getting multiple life sentences in jail, but killed himself after a month. And the 4 girls, remember, he only kidnapped 3, but one had gotten pregnant, and had a 5-year-old girl come out with her, are all living safe, hopefully happy lives, which I'm sure are just filled with heaps of PTSD by this point. A friend did have a whole hydroponic setup for peppers to make hot sauces. Weed he just bought, lol. I grow a ton of herbs and tomatoes in hydroponics, because I like fresh, good produce, and it's easier to maintain than 12 to 14 pots of plants. There aren't many things better than bruschetta caprese from homegrown fresh tomatoes and basil, homemade mozzarella and fresh out of the oven sourdough. I got pulled over late at night, and when the cop shined his light into the cargo area of my station wagon, the most visible objects were a shovel, rope, gloves, and the giant tarp-wrapped bundle of yard refuse I was bringing to the town compost in the morning. Surely there was at least one roll of duct tape or gorilla tape back there. At least he had a sense of humor about it when he strolled up to my window. So we're off to bury the body under the cover of night, huh? Officer, I think we both agree it isn't daylight work. When I was much younger, a friend and I were driving around some back roads at night. Nothing nefarious, just being 20-year-olds listening to music and laughing at dumb shit. We ended up in some neighborhood that I was unfamiliar with and turned around to leave. I worked for a local computer company and typically had 2 to 3 large computers in various states of disrepair in my backseat. Cop pulls me over for absolutely no reason that he could articulate, shines a flashlight into my car and sees an entire seat full of computer parts. Informs me that he was there because there had been multiple break-ins recently where people had stolen electronics. It took a good 15 minutes of my dumb 20-year-old brain stuttering at him to convince him that I was clearly too stupid and too unprepared to have represented a threat. I was walking down the street in college at 11 p.m., carrying a huge computer monitor, and of the campus cops stopped me. Asked me why I had a 23 inches CRT monitor, an expensive item in 1990, and no other computer stuff. Explained that I had just found it in the trash, and was going to use it for parts. Sat it on his car hood to get my ID, and water poured out of it. Since it was obviously broken, he sent me on my way. Lock picks. They're seen as thieves' tools, but lock picking isn't uncommon for a hobby. Have a friend who picked up the lockpick after one of his renters lost their keys and he couldn't find the backup set. Had to call a locksmith, and since they live over 15 miles out of town, it was a hell of a fee. Plus, it's not a bad idea to have a kit for getting into cars sitting around with some cars auto-locking doors. They aren't supposed to do it when the key is in the car, but apparently if you let a 2012 Chevy Avalanche sit for a week it will still lock itself. With the only set of keys in the car. The same friend found that one out the hard way. Again, locksmith is expensive that far out of town. I need to learn how because I had to pay $150 when my wife and I unknowingly became accomplices in locking our family out the house at 9:30 p.m. on Halloween last month. We didn't realize neither of us brought keys when we went trick-or-treating. That's how I found out I have smart locks. Locksmith said it makes it pretty much impossible to pick, so he had to use the airbags like when they do your car so he could release the latch. Seems like it just defeated the purpose. For anyone curious, I searched my lock on YouTube and the lockpicking lawyer was able to get it unlocked in exactly 1:52 seconds. Apparently it also has drill protection, which I assume means it makes it extremely difficult to just slam a bit through there and pull out the lock. TBF, compared to a lot of the other videos I've seen him do, 2 minutes is really good law. Nothing is impossible to pick, but if you're talking about the smart locks that connect to Wi-Fi and have keypads, they're no harder than normal locks. Depending on where you live, check local laws. You can get an acceptable set with practice locks for $20 to $30. I've picked a few locks for friends after only a couple minutes of practice. For me, water. My neighbors had well water and would dry up. They asked if they could run a hose and put it in their well, they would pay what was owed. Did this a lot last summer, no big deal, they paid. Then they bought a big above ground pool. Filled it for them, they always paid. My part was always around the same so I wasn't bent out of shape. One day the water meter guy knocked with an officer wanting to know why I was using so much water. I explained, showed the many hoses to reach my neighbors, and they were there to help explain. They explained to me that much water usage was throwing a red flag. So they were sent out to investigate to make sure no marijuana growing was happening. Make sure you go next door and make sure the pool is filled with water and just not a fake cover with 300 cannabis plants under it. Same can happen with electricity. Long time back I was propagating corals. Used high-power metal halide lamps and water pumps that took a lot of electric. Also you could see the glow from the UV lighting and MH units from the end of the road. I never did get a knock on my door, but I always expected it. In snowy climates, it's lack of snow. Drive through a neighborhood and every house has a layer of snow on it. And then suddenly there's one house that's bare. Chances are that's a grow op. At least, that used to be the case. They might add a bunch of roof insulation these days. A ritual dagger, as he described it. My one college roommate had one displayed and would occasionally need the room to himself. I opted for a place where I had my own room next year. Ya know, you donate a kidney, you're called a hero. You donate 2 kidneys and you're called a saint. But, try to donate 3 kidneys and, suddenly, there's a bunch of questions. Firearm suppressors, aka silencers. Just as legal to own as a pistol, same legal standards for ownership eligibility, with the caveat of some additional paperwork and a $200 tax. Used in almost no crimes at all, fully legal, fun as crap to shoot and easy on the ears, but tell someone outside of the community you own one and they think you are an assassin wannabe. I had all my baby teeth saved in a little container at one point, as an adult. Just never threw them away. I got rid of them when I watched the season of Dexter where there is a serial killer who kept a collection of his victims' teeth, and it made me think, yeah, this could look weird. My son came home from college and my wife found a lighter in his pocket when doing his laundry. She asked me why he would have a lighter in his pocket. I said because he smokes. She told me, my baby would never smoke. I walked away. Unless you're a historian or history teacher, too many books about the Third Reich or other dictatorship. A coffin. My senior year of college I was a resident assistant in an area that had townhouses. One of the townhouses was known to be trouble and were all in the film program. I went to bat for them over a few things and turned what had been an adversarial relationship with their previous RA into a very positive one. They had to build their own props as part of a script they had to shoot, one of which was a coffin, which really turned out amazing. At the end of the year, as a thank you, they gifted me the coffin. Turned out it was super handy during moving, since I could throw clothes in it and other things. Tons of room in there. The coffin went through 2 apartments where I always got weird looks moving it in, and then new friends and family were always taken aback because I used it like a coffee table in the living room. Eventually the missus made the decision that its presence was weirder than we wanted to be conveying when living in suburbia, so it's relegated to a Halloween decoration. Nazi memorabilia. There are 2 types of these people. 1. Neo-Nazis. They do it because they love it. Not illegal, but they may be under active surveillance anyway. Enough said about that. 2. History buffs. They keep that stuff because of the historical and monetary value. A lot of them like to do historical reenactments and public expos to show their collection. Most of these people don't just collect Nazi stuff but all sorts of militaria. There are some people who only collect Nazi stuff, and you should avoid them because they are usually weirdos. They view Hitler as a WWE heel more than actually evil. A fully operational main battle tank. In the US it is perfectly legal to both own a tank and drive said tank on the street. If you can pass the background check, you can get the stamps allowing said tank to be fully operational, including the main gun. It actually is illegal in some countries, but at least in the United States you are legally allowed to own as much paraphernalia of hate groups as you want. Might get you on a watch list, but as long as you're golden otherwise you're good. My uncle collects uniforms. He has Nazi uniforms, KKK robes, and even a DPRK uniform. All of them museum quality pieces with all the original trimmings and the appropriate weapons that would normally accompany them, though most of those are stored in a secure facility at a local museum. Mein Kampf. Surely that's the most correct answer. You see that on a bookshelf and you're reassessing everything you know about that person. I have a copy of Mein Kampf. I'm also a black man, so not much risk of being confused for a Nazi. Just like history, and it was important context. I did just forget to return it back to a library though. Also, it's in a stack of other WW2 biographies and autobiographies. So I guess just that one book in a vacuum would be weird. Growing up in Australia, I had a mate that was Italian. There was a farming area nearby with a heap of Greek and Italian citrus farmers. Some of them were genuinely connected in the Italian way. The mafia are everywhere, but in Australia they've traditionally had influence at the fruit, veg markets, like the big ones supplying shops in Sydney and Melbourne. Anyway, the morning after a party, old mate decides to drive us to his uncle's place. He lived 5 minutes drive down a dirt track in their property. It was basically a log cabin. Walking in, the first thing I noticed was the mantel above the fireplace. It had pictures of Jesus and Mary in the middle. They were flanked by pictures of Hitler and Mussolini. Naturally, I immediately felt dread. Then my mate lifted the lid to a wooden chest. It was full of automatic weapons and ammunition. I felt genuinely in the wrong place. My mate was confident his uncle was out for the day, but I was terrified of what would happen if he came back. By this stage we were well aware the family kept him in the property, knowing he'd be in jail if he lived in society. He was your stereotypical dysfunctional Vietnam veteran. He was nice enough. I met him a few times after, but he was different. You wouldn't ever get drunk with a man like that.